First, your reaction to the interview last night with Andrew Neil and Jeremy Corbyn as taking him on in terms of the issue of anti-Semitism. 4 times he failed to apologise to British Jews and to the chief rabbi over their concerns about his leadership and possible entry into number 10. What did you make of that interview?
Well, it was a very disappointing performance, and I'm sure his followers will be very unhappy about it. I thought it was also very revealing that we at last got to the obvious truth that the huge spending pledges Labour are making in this election will require more borrowing and will require tax increases on everyone, not just on the rich. And eventually that was dragged out of him.
Yeah, we'll come back to the tax issues and the spending proposals. Today, the SNP are going to be launching their manifesto. Nicola Sturgeon is going to say that she regards Boris Johnson as dangerous and unfit for office. So you have to vote for the SNP. Otherwise, you are going to get Brexit and a Tory government and with a dangerous and unfit leader. Is Boris Johnson dangerous and unfit for office? And why do you think she thinks that?
Well, of course he's not, and he's been our Prime Minister for the last few months, and people have seen him grow into the role, and he represents our country well, and he has an extremely engaging style, and he reaches out to voters in the way that quite a lot of other politicians don't, which is why he is in the position he's currently in.
And yet why, according to a new poll by YouGov conducted for The Times over the past 2 days, why do the same proportion of Britons, 30%, think Jeremy Corbyn is personally anti-Semitic as think Boris Johnson is personally racist?
Well, I've no idea. You better ask them. I know that Boris Johnson doesn't have a racist bone in his body. When he was Mayor of London, he showed that he could lead a city with very diverse population and participated in the festivities and in the viewpoints of the different communities within London.
And yet, even criticism from your former party co-chair, Baroness Fazia, a Muslim peer, who said that she thinks that Islamophobia is rife in the Conservative Party, criticised the Prime Minister for comments he's made in articles when he's a Telegraph and Spectator columnist, talking about women in burqas looking like letterboxes and bank robbers. The phrase pickaninnies used in a slightly satirical context, absolutely, if you read the full context of the article. But there have been these accusations dogging your party leader for some time.
We have to read the full article. The article about women's dress was actually a passionate defence of the right of women to dress as they see fit. It wasn't a racist article in any way. Again, I've known Boris for quite a long time. I've never heard him express any racist comment, and he is a very tolerant person when discussing different people's views and religions and outlooks.
Do you think, though, that this is going to damage him, or do you think this is whataboutery? So accusations of anti-Semitism against Jeremy Corbyn, and that's just countered with accusations of Islamophobia against Boris Johnson. Is it just whataboutery? Does it matter? Do you think this is going to make a difference to the election, how people perceive the party leader?
Well, it's what the people who most dislike Boris say about him. They caricature him or lie about him in the way that happens in modern politics. Indeed, it's probably happened in politics over many centuries, and it's just something a senior politician has to live with, that politicians are regularly traduced and lied about, and you have to find your own way of dealing with it.
Let's go back to the issue you mentioned there in relation to the Andrew Neil interview with Jeremy Corbyn regarding taxes, and Jeremy Corbyn being asked about how he was going to fund, for in particular, the 58 to 60 billion pound cost of refunding and compensating the WASPy women, the women who lost out because of the changes to the age at which they could collect their state pensions, but also being faced with the information about how tax rises there will be tax rises for people who are not earning 80,000 and above in the top 5%. Now, an awful lot of the Labour manifesto is about, you can have all this massive spending on public services, massive investment, far more than the Conservatives are promising, but you won't have to pay extra taxes if you're an ordinary earner or low earner, or indeed above average earner. Do you think this has exploded the Labour manifesto? Is this going to be a big hole in the Labour pledges and promises? Or do you think actually an awful lot of people, they kind of already knew that this amount of spending was going to have to be funded by tax rises across the board, because the Institute of Fiscal Studies and others have already said that. In which case, does this make a difference, do you think, in terms of the election outcome?
Well, I think it's a very good interview, and I think it's highlighted the fundamental flaw of the whole Labour offer. But as you rightly say, a lot of us got there before Andrew Neil, and we're delighted that he's done such a good job exposing it more widely. There is no way you can suddenly increase spending on everything in the public sector and nationalise great chunks of the private sector, which is not properly accounted for in their numbers, and think that just the top 1% of earners will pay the bill. They'll be on a plane out of here because of the tax threats for them, making it more likely that everybody else will have to pay even more tax, because we'll have to make up for the loss of tax on the super rich at the same time as having to make up for the tax needed to pay for all these additional expenditures.
Do you think that Boris Johnson should firm up a date and a time for his interview with Andrew Neil, or do you think he's running scared of that?
I haven't talked to Boris about this. My view is it's an entirely personal matter. We all, as individuals, have to make decisions, particularly in elections, about what we feel comfortable doing and what we think is the most sensible use of our time. And some interviews are a good idea and some interviews are a bad idea. I will back Boris in whatever his decision is.
Really, you think it would be acceptable for all the other party leaders to carry out those interviews for him not to do that interview? Wouldn't that say to voters that he's running scared?
I think he'll come to a very wise decision, but I have no idea what it's going to be, and I'm not trying to influence his decision. I feel that you have to be confident in yourself that the interview is the right thing to do, because you need to be in the right psychological position to undertake an interview.
Do you think he might not be?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm not going to be able to help you on this.
Well, you say you haven't spoken to Boris Johnson. Have you by any chance spoken to Jacob Rees-Mogg, a fellow staunch Brexiteer? Because he seems to have disappeared from view since he was criticised for his comments about Grenfell. Is he still alive and well?
As far as I know, but I've been busy with my election. He's been busy with his election, and we're quite a few miles apart.
Yes, it has been quite an election campaign so far. We've still got the best part of 2 weeks to go until Election Day on December the 12th. Now, there are a number of people running as independents, and you are among those who've had the endorsement of people like Michael Heseltine, Lord Heseltine now, of course, saying that people should be voting for independents or for the Liberal Democrat candidates instead of the Conservatives. We've got the SNP leader today, Nicola Sturgeon, who's apparently going to be talking about Boris Johnson being dangerous and unfit for office. Are you comfortable now with the idea that you could be in campaigning as an independent and others supporting Liberal Democrats and the SNP? We could be leading us to hung Parliament territory, Brexit not happening. I know you don't want Brexit to happen, but also a Jeremy Corbyn premiership and possibly the SNP getting their second independence referendum as early as next year. Does that sit comfortably with you as a former Conservative?
Nothing sits particularly comfortably. We're between the devil and the deep blue sea. We have the two main parties led by individuals who are both unfit for office for different reasons. I'm certainly not going to ever facilitate a Jeremy Corbyn government going into Downing Street, and if I were elected as an independent, I wouldn't do that under any circumstances. Equally, I think Boris Johnson is a serious menace. I think he's a dishonest politician, and certainly the way in which the Conservative manifesto has been put out it's a dishonest document, and he's making promises about solving or bringing Brexit to an end which are simply not tenable. And if he gets elected with a majority government and we leave on the 31st of January, we are going to be plunged into a prolonged period of crisis. So I remain of the view that I would like to see Brexit resolved by going back with a second referendum. And if I could achieve that, and if I were elected, I would seek to do so. If I can't, I would obviously, if I'm in independence, seek to moderate the policies of whoever's in government.
But even so, you said you wouldn't vote yourself for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister. You'd vote against that. However, by not being a Conservative MP, not able to produce help produce a majority for the Conservatives, given the polls seem to suggest that pollsters again and again tell us how much do they know, because voters have a funny habit of making up their own minds on the day. But they're saying, look, there is really no possibility of a Jeremy Corbyn majority government. So the only option for a majority government is going to be under Boris Johnson. But you would effectively you would be enabling a hung Parliament, which would lead to a Jeremy Corbyn premiership, surely.
I don't think a hung Parliament would lead to a Jeremy Corbyn premiership at all. In fact, on the contrary, I think that there's no possibility of a premiership led by Jeremy Corbyn whatsoever. If there were a hung Parliament, then either, if the Conservatives are the largest party, Boris Johnson would have to compromise and listen to reason over the issue of a second referendum. That's one possibility. Or the alternative is you have to set up a government of national unity of some description, but it certainly wouldn't be led by Jeremy Corbyn.
You describe Boris Johnson as a serious menace and the manifesto as a dishonest document. Why on both counts?
Look at the manifesto. He's given the impression that we are leaving the EU, that there's a huge amount of public funding that can now be available to public services. Actually, the amount that's been costed is only $3 billion. So the rest is completely smoke and mirrors, or it's promises made by the previous administration. So the idea that there's suddenly going to be a bonanza in public expenditure, I'm left with less completely opaque. And as I say, ultimately, his main selling point is, back me, we're going to leave, we're going to get Brexit over and done with. And it's perfectly obvious that is not going to happen. If we leave on the 31st, we simply move to a further stage of Brexit where the United Kingdom is uniquely disadvantaged in terms of its leverage in the negotiation.
Many would argue that actually, whether it's a hung parliament, whether Jeremy Corbyn ends up as Prime Minister, or not leaving the EU, having a second referendum, possibly even not just a second referendum on the EU, but on the second referendum on Scottish independence as well, will actually lead to more of a crisis in this country.
We are in the middle of a big crisis, but it seems to me that if we're leaving the EU in the way in which Boris Johnson envisages, and the chances of keeping the Union of the United Kingdom together in view of the deal which he has says he wishes to pursue is very low. So when people say, oh, well, there might be a risk of a Scottish independence referendum, and I'm a unionist to my fingertips, I want to keep the Union of the United Kingdom together, but you can't just keep it together by trying to postpone the possibility of an independence referendum if, in fact, a Scottish government comes into office in Edinburgh with a manifesto commitment that is what they want and they have a majority. So one's got to look at this in the round. The fact is that leaving the EU and Brexit endangers the Union of the United Kingdom very much. And Boris Johnson's version, which in my view is going to prove to be undeliverable in the course of the next 12 months, endangers it even more.
Let's also, if we can, talk about last night, that Andrew Neil interview. A very difficult night for Jeremy Corbyn, pretty difficult the night before for Nicola Sturgeon, another one tonight. When is Boris Johnson going to have his Andrew Neil interview?
Well, he's next but one, isn't he, after Joe Swinson?
Is he? We understand from Andrew Neil that a date hasn't been fixed. Is he definitely going to do it?
Yeah, I imagine he is, yeah. And I imagine he'll do extremely well. And
do you think it's tenable for him not to do it? Is it a possibility that he'll run scared of that interview?
I don't know, Julia. I expect him to do it, and I expect him to answer all the questions, unlike Jeremy Corbyn.
OK, well, let's just talk briefly about that, because the issues of anti-Semitism, Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, was backing what the Chief Rabbi was saying. Hindu leaders, other religious leaders have also spoken out about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party and that particular issue. In terms of that issue being a massive problem for the Labour Party, there's also claims about Islamophobia and also anti-Semitism within the Conservative Party that hasn't been rooted out. Now, look, I think most independent commentators would say it's not been on the same scale. You currently are not subject to an investigation from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which the Labour Party is. But do you accept that there is a problem with some of your candidates, councillors and the like, and supporters being Islamophobic?
Well, look, unfortunately, there's a degree of prejudice, racism and discrimination in all walks of life, and it rears its head in all political parties. The test is how political parties respond to it, and our values as Conservatives say that we absolutely abhor that, and individuals who are found guilty of it will be sanctioned and thrown out of the party, and we do that. We do that regularly. Somebody was expelled from the party for Islamophobia only the other day. I want to see the most robust processes possible in the Conservative Party. That's one of the reasons why we're going to be conducting a thorough review of prejudice and discrimination in how we handle complaints and ensuring that those are fit for purpose. But I think you are right to say that there's no moral equivalence between the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party and Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. You've seen the Chief Rabbi, a man of unimpeachable integrity, calling out Jeremy Corbyn for failure to act. You see 80%, the polls suggest, of British Jews saying that Jeremy Corbyn is anti-Semitic, 50% saying they would consider leaving the country if he became Prime Minister. Most Jewish Labour MPs leaving the party, and as you rightly point out, the Equality and Human Rights Commission investigating the party, only the second British political party ever to be investigated after the BNP,
And we're told there are thousands of cases of anti-Semitism that they're now considering. I think it's a moral stain, and somebody like Jeremy Corbyn simply shouldn't be allowed to be our Prime Minister.
But why does a YouGov poll for the Times conducted over the past 2 days find that 30% of Britons think Jeremy Corbyn is personally anti-Semitic, but also 30% think Boris Johnson is personally racist?
Well, that's not the Prime Minister that I got to know well in recent years. He's a very liberal person. He's a one-nation conservative. He's built the most diverse cabinet that we ever seen in this country. He has a Muslim chancellor at his side. There's absolutely no credible evidence that the Prime Minister is racist or Islamophobic. I'm not going to be, I'm not somebody who throws around accusations about individuals. I'm not going to do it about Jeremy Corbyn. But what I would say is that anti-Semitism was not rife in the Labour Party under Tony Blair, under Gordon Brown, under Ed Miliband. And I'll make this prediction, Julia: anti-Semitism will abate in the Labour Party when Jeremy Corbyn is no longer its leader.
Okay.
So this did begin and end under his leadership, and we mustn't allow somebody with that track record to be the leader of this country. I think that would be terribly sad for British Jews, who will feel genuinely fearful when they see that exit poll coming out at 10 o'clock on December the 12th.
And what about the SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon? She's launching her manifesto today, where she's going to say that Boris Johnson is dangerous and unfit for office.
Well, we know what's happening in this election. Jeremy Corbyn is going to make a deal if he wants to become Prime Minister with Nicola Sturgeon. That will involve 2 referendums next year, one on a pointless referendum on the EU and one on breaking up the Union in Scotland. I think that would be a terrible waste of 2020. We want to prevent that. We want to ensure next year is a year of growth and opportunity, and that means getting Brexit done, finally having a majority government and breaking the deadlock in Parliament.
Okay.
We can get on to talking about all the things that we care about, including today.
I thought you were going to get to that.
For mobile signal to an end.
Now, this is a plan within 100 days of a Conservative majority government. The Prime Minister is going to announce today that poor mobile phone signal in rural areas will be a thing of the past. And so we're going to bring mobile phone coverage in this country to 95% of the country within 100 days. If it's so easy to do in 100 days, why haven't you done it already?
Well, we're actually going to be the first country in the world to strike the kind of deal that we're on the cusp of doing, which is where we bring the 4 big mobile operators, O2, 3, Vodafone and EE, together and enable you to roam so you can move seamlessly from your operator to another one as you enter a not spot. And we're also going to spend £1 billion, 500 million from the operators, 500 million from the taxpayer, on more masts that will be shared between operators across the country. This is really a revolutionary way in which we handle mobile signal in this country. It's been a long time coming, but it will make a massive difference. We think that around 280,000 homes and businesses will get coverage as a result of this where they don't already, and 16,000 kilometres of roads will have good quality mobile signal on them where they don't today. I'm sat in Hereford. I'm about to go to Brecon in a few minutes. And in these sorts of parts of the United Kingdom, hundreds of thousands of people will now be able to go about their daily lives and their businesses with good quality mobile signal, and the scourge of not spots will be consigned to history. OK,
you say you're out and about on the campaign trail. We know all of your fellow cabinet ministers are. But we haven't seen much of Jacob Rees-Mogg. He seems to have completely disappeared in recent weeks since the criticism of what he had to say about Grenfell Tower and that fateful night of the fire. Where is Jacob Rees-Mogg?
Well,
is he trapped underneath something heavy? Is he locked in a room?
You can find him in Somerset, Julia. I don't know if you've been to northeast Somerset, but I'm sure you'll be able to find him there. Is
he considered? I mean, we certainly see him in the Labour side. I've not seen much of Diane Abbott either. There seem to be some members of the shadow cabinet and the cabinet who aren't allowed out to speak in public to us. Why is that?
No, I don't think that's the case. The PM built a great team just 3 months ago, and you're seeing that team out on the airwaves, whether that's Sajid Javid or Priti Patel, Matt Hancock as Health Secretary, crisscrossing the country, talking about our record investment in hospitals and the recruitment of more GPs and nurses, all the things that people actually care about. We're going to keep on campaigning energetically and positively, because we fundamentally believe that if we can get Brexit done, end that gridlock in Parliament, there's so many opportunities for this country. but it does require us to get that majority government at long last.
As a former Tory Deputy Prime Minister, have openly now called on voters, Tory voters, not to vote for the Conservative Party, but to back Lib Dems and independents. Why have you done that?
Well, in the simplest analysis, it's a question of personal integrity. I have argued on the biggest issue of our time that Britain should fight for its corner in Europe, should be a member of the central driving force of Europe, should represent Britain in Europe. And every Conservative Prime Minister has said the same. So how can I say something different? I mean, I know everybody thinks we're in politics and what we can get out of it. I totally reject that. I think that politics does attract people with principled views, and it is essential that they stick to them.
Well, you talk about this being a matter of personal integrity, but isn't there a part of personal integrity when it comes to being a politician? Now you're a peer, but you're an MP for many years, in terms of respecting the vote of the people of this country. And Liberal Democrats have an official policy of not just holding a second referendum, and that's in the event of a coalition, but if they were elected as a majority party, they would simply revoke Article 50. They would just never implement the decision of the British people from 2016. How does your personal integrity sit with that?
Well, I've spent my life resisting the will of the people when they elected Labour governments. They had clear mandates, they had majorities in Parliament, and they tried to do things which I had in the election resisted and fought, as had my party.
Well, hold on a minute, Lord Heseltine. No, resisting. You can. No. There's a difference, Lord Heseltine. Lord Heseltine, there's a big difference, is there not, between saying, I don't agree with this particular, you're being a Conservative for many years, I don't agree with this Labour government, I don't agree with their policies, but you've never actually tried to stop the Labour Prime Minister moving into number 10 and taking office, implementing, the actual outcome of that election, have you? That's very different from actually stopping the implementation of a public vote.
No, but you asked me why I didn't implement the view of the people. The view of the people had elected a Labour government with a specific set of policies, which I set out first to resist and subsequently to reverse. And that is completely what I'm now doing. I am against giving up Britain's influence in Europe, and the Conservative Party has shifted its position. I won't shift mine.
Does it concern you at all, some of the criticisms that have been made towards those standing as independents or moving to other parties, that by splitting votes, by standing against the Conservatives, you are making it more likely that we will have a hung parliament? There seems to be the two options, seem to be a Tory majority or a hung parliament on the current polling, unless it changes massively. And that hung parliament would lead, from what the Liberal Democrats and the SNP have said, effectively to a Labour government, possibly a Corbyn government being in power. I know you're worried about Brexit and Britain's economic performance if we leave the EU, but would you not also be worried, for the similar reasons, about having a Jeremy Corbyn-led Labour government in power?
Well, you know, and I know, and everybody knows that there isn't the slightest chance of Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister introducing his manifesto. Indeed, the only real question about Jeremy Corbyn is whether he'll even be leader of the Labour Party by Christmas. Now, the fact is that the Lib Dems have made it absolutely clear that they will not support Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. There is no way, except in the minds of those who long and love scare stories.
Well, hold on a minute. It may well be that Jeremy Corbyn is ousted.
The oldest story in the world, and it's come up from every election I can remember, one version or another of Reds under the beds. And the Corbyn threat is another version of Reds under the beds. If as many are saying, they think that Jeremy Corbyn may well be ousted, and in the event of getting the Lib Dems or the SNP to support a government, that may be the price. However, we wouldn't see, say, Tony Blair reincarnated as Labour leader. It would be someone who is endorsed by the Corbynistas, by John McDonnell, who would be the next Labour leader. You may have similar views to Jeremy Corbyn, all of which, again, you would disagree with. So even if it wasn't Jeremy Corbyn, it would still be someone who is very sympathetic to his political viewpoint. Yes, but you see, look, there is no conceivable way there can be a government without the support of the Lib Dems. And the Lib Dems were nearly destroyed by their coalition with us in 2010-15. There is no way they are going to support anything like the Corbyn-esque agenda. And it's so obvious to anyone who knows anything about politics that it's hardly worth discussing. The only coalition that could come together would be a short-term coalition designed to put the Brexit question back to the British people in a second referendum. I want that. I will campaign to remain, and I hope we would win.
And at that point, do you believe then after that, then there would be a general election and then you would have an opportunity, you would then go back to supporting the Conservatives? Would that be the case?
Bingo. That is absolutely my view.
That is your plan. And just finally, I must ask you about the interview last night with Andrew Neil, which Jeremy Corbyn took part in. Nicola Sturgeon of the SNP had a pretty rough ride from Andrew Neil the night before. We've got Joe Swinson tonight. We still haven't got a date for Boris Johnson's interview with Andrew Neil. I think many people think he'd be running scared after the interview last night. But there were quite a devastating revelations in terms of his refusal to apologise to the Jewish community, 4 times asked explicitly over the issue of anti-Semitism in the party after his criticism from the chief rabbi. What did you make of Jeremy Corbyn refusing to apologise to the Jewish people?
Well, it's despicable, of course. Any form of racial intolerance or class intolerance is despicable, and I have so voted and argued at one time at risk to my position in the Conservative Party against anything of that sort. But of course, the consequence is simple. There will be a significant number of people in the Labour Party who will not vote Labour, but who will vote Lib Dem, because this releases them from their understandable traditional loyalties to the Labour Party.